The Chainsmoker. By nojustno. This happened to me 6 years ago and will haunt me for the rest of my life. I grew up in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in all of North America. The neighborhood was initially supposed to house 12,000 people, but by the time I was 12 years old it had a population of around 30,000 people. It was one of Toronto's poorest neighborhoods, with the 50% of the population being under the poverty line, though the crime rate was not nearly as high as you'd expect it to be. The neighborhood was mostly made up of immigrants and refugees looking to find a better life, my family included. It was summer break between 5th and 6th grade, and my cousins, who happened to live in the same apartment complex, were at our place watching movies. I was getting hungry, so I grabbed some money and headed for the convenience store to get snacks. It was around 7 p.m., so the sun was still up and there was an hour and a half left of light. The convenience store was half a block away, so I walked it. When I got to the parking lot of the residential building the store was in, I noticed a man wearing a black hoodie, with horizontal green stripes, standing in the corner of the parking lot. There was nothing too noticeable about the man, except that he was smoking directly under a no smoking sign. Nothing uncommon in that neighborhood, just kind of ironic. I walk up the steps and into the cramped convenience store. There might have been 7 people in there, but it looked as if it was already almost full, probably as big as a mid-sized apartment, and was already stocked up to the ceiling. Point is, if anyone enters, everyone in the store knows. So I come in, and directly to the left of the entrance is a shelf packed with many different varieties of candy. I was like any other child who has 20 different varieties of candy laid out in front of them, but only has the budget for 2, lost in thought. At the moment I forget about the man who was smoking. He enters through the door. He walks into the nook of the store behind me, where they keep all of the flatbread. I can feel his gaze on the back of my head. I quickly decide on the snacks, pay and leave. I walk out, down the steps and to the sidewalk on the other side of the narrow parking lot, when I hear the chimes of the exit door. I glance behind me to see who is exiting the store, and I am a shade under petrified when I see the man exit the store, especially when I notice he is carrying nothing in his hands. I quicken my pace just a tad, and reason with myself that he just bought another pack of cigarettes, and just put it in his pockets. That idea has barely crossed my mind by the time I am halfway back to my building. I turn around to see if he is still there. He is maybe 15 feet away from me when we make eye contact. He has his hood off, and I can see his face clearly. He looks to be Afghan. There were a lot of those since the neighborhood was a hot spot for refugees, and at the time Afghanistan was doing really badly. He has scars covering his face, and is balding on top. He couldn't have been too tall because he wasn't much taller than 6th grade me, so like 5 feet 4 inches or 5 feet 6 inches. I spin back around and start to speed up, and I hear footsteps behind me quicken. By the time we got to the D-shaped driveway to my building we were speed walking. Remember, it's broad day and there are plenty of people around, and a man chasing a kid around is weird to anybody. As soon as we hit the split in the sidewalk, which separates the driveway and the straight path, I start sprinting at full speed to my building. Luckily there was someone buzzing in at that exact moment, and I slipped in the door behind him. I quickly whirl around and pull the pneumatic glass door shut. When I look up I see the man, seconds too late, on the other side of the glass. The look on his face still scares me. He stared at me with an expression of anger I had never seen before, nor have seen since. I run to the elevators and push the button. He starts rattling the door. The expression on his face was still sinister. When the elevator comes he understands that he won't catch me. He leaves the way we came. Chased through Satansville by a possible cult member. By B. Mongan 1104. In Pennsylvania, right near the border into Delaware, there is a narrow, eerie place with deformed trees, closed-off paths, and lots of legends. It is formerly known as Devil's Road, the main attraction in a place called Satansville, which encompasses the whole of dark twists, isolated roads, and unsettling encounters. It was written about in the book Weird Pennsylvania, which highlights the creepy places of the state. According to many rumors, there is a cult house hidden in the woods surrounding the road, and any trespassers on the road, especially those who stop, will be chased out with a black or white SUV or truck. For years, I had read about the place and heard spine-chilling stories, until I couldn't stop thinking about seeing it for myself. My friend Matt and I spent almost every Friday night at the mall together, as teenagers do. As expected, it can get pretty boring pretty fast, especially with no money to actually have a motive to shop around for anything other than disappointment. Visiting Satansville, without telling our parents, became another weekly tradition of sorts, after he told me about his experience a month before our first visit. He had told me that when he visited with his guy friends, his phone service completely cut out, leaving them without Google Maps in a potentially dangerous, unclear area that was already scarcely mapped. Soon after, he told me, a black truck came off a dirt road and followed closely behind them until they found the main road. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to be hooked. Not too much happened on our first few trips. We would see other cars rarely, as it's a hidden road that is no longer marked due to excessive theft of the street sign. Occasionally, the cars would be black in color and we would get a rush of adrenaline. It was fun, but not exactly terrifying. Until one night. We finished up at the mall around 6, and we left with enough time to circle around once or twice with daylight, and the remainder of the time in the dark. It was about a 40-minute drive to Satansville from the mall, and I was tingling with excitement. According to the legends, cars that visit frequently are more likely to have experiences at this place, and this would be our third time visiting in the last few weeks. Instead of Matt and I going alone this time, we brought our friend Lola, who was very outgoing and would likely have a sense of humor in a situation we'd be too scared to continue in normally. We drove down the highway and finally made the first turn leading to seclusion. Matt and I had pinpointed several areas where we thought the cult house may be, but stopping on the road is illegal, so we'd never had a real chance to explore. At least, that's the logical reason I give in lieu of us being major cowards. The ambience immediately changed as we entered Satansville, and the cool night air fled in through the cracked windows. In the first few turns, other people aren't entirely a rare sight, a few trucks pulling out of driveways, alike. However, the turn onto Devil's Road never loses its wow factor. The trees on both sides of the narrow road lean away from the forest aggressively, not just a tilt but completely bending in the trunk away from things we could only imagine. We were approaching the first major bend in the road, and a car was coming up towards us. It was a tight squeeze, nearly impossible for two opposing vehicles to pass. The presence of a car alone was enough to cause a twinge in my gut. Matt was focused on squeezing by while turning, and Lola was too busy cracking jokes to see what I saw, but I have never forgotten the face since then. I looked over to the white Jeep to my left, and the window was incredibly tinted but half down. Looking back at me, straight into my eyes like he'd been looking at me long before I looked to him, was a young man, maybe about 25, with long blonde hair, a deathly pale face, and horribly thin fingers on the steering wheel. He was not at all focused on driving, as his eyes pierced me, and this is the worst part, his neck was turned completely towards me, while the rest of his body was completely straightforward. This may not sound creepy, but it was not normal to bend that way. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over Lola and Matt laughing at our antics. I couldn't break his gaze. I was stuck staring at him until finally, Matt passed the bend and he was gone. I kept checking the rear view windows, terrified with a feeling I'd never quite felt before. When I could no longer see the Jeep, though it felt as though he could still see me, I quietly asked my friends if they'd seen him. Neither of them had looked at him, nor felt anything unusual. I was pretty unsettled, yet excited to see what else would happen. We turned off Devil's Road, but were still in Satansville, preparing to loop back around, when we passed a little shack that always housed two black trucks. There was no sign of any other drivers, and we wanted to stir the pot a little. We stopped for a few moments and honked the horn, flashed our blinkers, then kept driving. We also blasted Old Town Road for some reason, because that was our peak of comedy at the time. We looped back around and were back on Devil's Road when Matt stopped mid-sentence to adjust his mirror. In the darkening distance was a black truck. We giggled with nervous excitement and kept driving. It was exciting, but it kept a reasonable distance, and I think we all kinda assumed it was a coincidence. That is, until we turned off Devil's Road once more and saw that there were no trucks parked by the shack anymore. We lost the truck when we turned on the main road to circle back around again. We circled around 2 more times, nervous but skeptical, and not much happened other than an ass-riding white SUV that kept blinking its headlights. Not gonna lie, that freaked us out, and the return of one truck to the shack. This is where it gets really intense. On our 5th loop, we were all very tense. The aura had changed to heavy, and it was completely dark at this point. Things had started to feel more ominous, probably from the slightly less passive actions taken towards us by whoever was there. We went down the bends, peering nervously into the woods. Some trees were marked with 666s and upside-down crosses, marks of other, more ballsy teenagers, and there was a distant light in the woods, courtesy of God knows what. As we turned off Devil's Road, but still in the heart of Satansville, headlights appeared behind us. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was, as it was pitch black and we'd just turned the first major bend. Moments later, the truck appeared behind us speeding. We were going about 25 and the truck must have floored it to catch up, and it drove uncomfortably close to us. I was the one to see it first. It was a black truck, windows tinted and driver unknown. We drove on for a minute, freaking out and turning completely behind us like creepy Jeep guy, but more normal. Soon, a second truck joined behind it at a fork in the road, and they revved their engines as if in communication. The truck sped up, nearly crashing into us, and we were forced to speed up. This continued through many intense twists and turns, where our speed reached up to 70 at the maximum. They flashed their lights, kept speeding up and getting closer. At this point, we were losing our shit. They were definitely either going to run us off the road, or catch us and do God knows what. They had these weird red lights on the tops of their trucks, and the light was reflecting off every window in our tiny Honda. Just above a small hill, the main road was visible, and relief flooded us. We panicked again, though, when we realized we would have to wait for traffic to slow before we could turn, and they would definitely catch us. With nothing else to do, we stopped and glanced behind us. The trucks were gone. We all expected a sudden ambush, but made the turn onto the highway and started home, talking about what the F had just happened. We came to the conclusion that the trucks had probably turned onto a dirt road only visible to those who know it's there, and that they were chasing us away from their activities like the rumors say. What were they doing exactly? We have no idea, and we had no intention of finding out, as we hadn't been back since. I still can't get the face and presence of the man in the Jeep out of my head, and this was over a year ago now. So, creepy Jeep guy and potential cult leaders, let's not meet. Ever. Thanks for listening. The link to the Reddit post are in the description below. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.